Did you I think I remember one time you told a story about the gym, going to the gym.
Oh yeah.
Can you recall? I mean,
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
we develop material and it gets in the archives. And do you remember how you told that one? I almost fell out of my chair. It was so funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. Joe Griffith, who was in that picture, helped me with that story because the way I tell it is that I ask people, how many of y'all, have ever joined a gym or an exercise place, and a bunch of people raise their hand. I said, how many of y'all found some little reason not to go back after a couple of weeks? And a bunch of them raised their hands. And I said, well, I joined the first one in Columbia. It was a Nautilus gym run by a high school football coach who was in Columbia area. And I remember I was friends with him, and I called him up and I said, I need to get myself back in shape, lose some weight. Can you help me? He said, yeah, come on down, bring your money and some loose clothing. And I remember telling him, if I had any loose clothing, I'd have never called you to begin with. And because everything I had was too tight. Anyway, he said, we'll go buy some loose clothing. So I went over to our local big boy store called Added Dimensions at the time. A great name for a fat boy shop. And I bought the biggest thing they had. And I played sports for years, so I knew what to pack, take to a workout. And I had my bag all packed. Never will forget walking in that first day, and the very first person I spotted had wide shoulders, little teeny waist, muscles on top of muscles on both arms. Kind of person looked like they pumped iron about 4 or 5 hours a day. The kind of person I'm talking about. And she was the cashier. And then they took me up to the locker room, and I'm up there trying to get myself dressed and got my foot up on a bench. And there's another guy in there who apparently been coming for a while. And he's kind of one of those uppity kind of guys that just thought he was hot stuff. Anyway, he said, well, it's good you're doing this. This is going to work for you. I said, that's great. I'm glad. That's why I'm here. And he said, but this exercise isn't going to be enough. I said, what do you mean? He said, there's 2 other things you're going to have to do. But to lose all that weight, you obviously need to lose. And that's when I wanted to slap him, but I didn't. And I said, well, being my nice Southern self, I said, well, what are those 2 things I ought to do? And he said, well, one of them is you got to eat nothing but tuna till you lose all the weight. I mean, morning, noon, and night, just cans of tuna. I got tickled thinking about the number of 18-wheelers full of tuna coming in my neighborhood it'd take to get me down to fighting weight. And I said, well, what's the second thing? He said, well, the second thing is you got to run 4 or 5 miles every day. I know this is going to come as a shock to the people who are watching or listening to this that I'm not a runner. Never have been. Matter of fact, I told my family if they ever get a phone call saying, we done found that big boy out by the road dead with a pair of running shoes on, that ain't never going to happen. I promise them they ain't never going to get that phone call. So anyway. And
oh my gosh, that's so
what's interesting is about that story, the way I told it for years was, because it was true, the first person I did see was a guy who had all those big muscles. But Joe Griffith said, you need to add the line, and she was the cashier. And I did.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
And it added a whole lot more to that story. So anyway.